Director of Career Development Programs at Roosevelt University. And I'd like to welcome all of you for joining us this afternoon to get some advice from our alumni panel on best practices for a cross-country job search. And so we have this set up as a panel discussion, and we have a guest from our faculty on the Heller College business side of the house, Dr. Joanne Howard. She's going to serve as our moderator. Thank you, Dr. Howard. And she offers Conlin Public Strategy clients extensive experience in nonprofit management, program evaluation, strategic planning. In addition to her work with Conlin Public Strategies, Dr. Howard is a clinical assistant professor of public administration at the Illinois Institute of Technology, IIT, Stewart School of Business. She has taught courses in public management, social capital, performance measurement, policy design, ethics, and professional responsibility. And she received the Stewart School's Excellence in Teaching Award in 2019. Dr. Howard's research interests include pipeline programs for underrepresented students, public school finance, and continuous improvement for nonprofit organizations. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Howard, who will introduce our panel.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for introducing me. I am going to introduce our dear colleague, Dan Howard, no relation. But Dan, he is a graduate of the Heller School of Business, and his bachelor's is in hospitality and tourism management. And Dan was even a member of the Roosevelt basketball team, which is so fantastic. And upon graduation, Dan, he went to work for a market research firm in a leadership and operational role before he transitioned to a talent agency where he worked with Fortune 500 clients like Visa, Exxon, and United Airlines to fill contract-based positions. After spending time working in an agency setting, he joined Motorola Solutions, where he works with talent acquisition team, filling internal needs for mission-critical communication. And so our other colleague hasn't joined us yet, but we hope to have Karen Gunzel join us, and she is an IT quality assurance specialist, and she works for Biogen in Durham, North Carolina. And Karen, she grew up on the south side of Chicago, and she's had many jobs in biotechnology and biology. So we hope that she will join us very soon. But Dan, you have really had an interesting role. You were in hospitality and tourism, but you're not in that area right now. So can we ask you, how did you make that transition from hospitality and tourism?
So I'll be honest, I wasn't tough enough for hospitality and tourism. I could take the beatings, but after a while, I wanted a little bit more work-life balance. Working till 3 or 4 in the morning every day kind of took its toll on me. So I decided to take my experiences and leverage it, and I was able to get a role with a market research firm. And I started out in a management role, and then I slowly worked my way up into a leadership role. It's really kind of incredible what you can do once you kind of understand how to leverage your experience and where it can take you from there. It opens a lot of doors.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And what I want to say to our audience, you can put questions in the chat area in the event that you want to ask us a question that we do not cover. But what I want to say is that life is filled with serendipity. And so many times you think, oh, I'm going to major in X and then I'm going to get a job in Y. But you'll have turns and crossroads that you'll go past. And so we just want to let you know that. So where you are now, you won't be in 5 years. So Dan, I wanted to ask you, what surprises or obstacles did you encounter in your relocation and your job search?
I think the biggest surprise for me was coming initially out of school. I had this assumption that my degree would carry this incredible amount of weight, and that every employer would be throwing themselves because I had a college degree. And that's really, sometimes it's the case, but sometimes you have to show the skills that come with the degree, and you have to be able to communicate those skills clearly. A degree is very impressive to a lot of employers, but at the same time, you have to be able to communicate what went into getting that degree, everything from time management to the tools you used to just about everything you did. You have to be able to effectively communicate that over to who you're interviewing with, and be able to, like I said before, leverage it in the proper way. Whether it's an understanding of a tool as simple as Excel, all the way through as simple as something as time management. Your ability to communicate those things and how you obtained carries far more weight.
Yeah. And so you have had the opportunity to work with some really big companies, Visa, Exxon, and United Airlines, placing people in roles. Can you give, our colleagues in the audience advice on their resume and how they convey whether or not they want to move? So if they're in Chicago, let's say they want to go to New York or California, can you indicate, how they can convey that in the job?
So doing it in the resume is going to be tough. If it's a career change, clearly stating your objective, why you're making a career change. So that way they understand your thought process. It's really easy for me to understand my thought process because I'm thinking it. But as an employer, sometimes it's unclear to me. If I'm getting a resume and all I see on it is Indiana and the roles in Las Vegas or New York to California, my immediate reaction is going to be, why? Why are you looking to move? So making sure that there's something on your resume clearly stating the why behind it goes a long way, because a lot of times I get so many applicants that it's just clear it's a quick apply on Indeed or a quick apply on Glassdoor, and they're not looking where they're applying to, they're just applying. So when I'm looking at resumes, if I see something that's clearly stating why you're going to make the move, it goes a long, long way. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely answers the question. And in fact, one of our colleagues asked the question, is it a good idea to leave your home address off of your resume if you're applying for an out-of-town job?
So I think yes, because there are roles that are automatic, like there are companies and there are roles that are automatically going to disqualify people based on their location. Now they can ask you, where you're currently located. And I've worked with some companies where they're looking for people in very certain geographical regions for travel purposes. Most of those are probably a little bit more around sales roles or support roles, but that's just because if there's a problem that comes up, they want somebody who can get on site in X amount of minutes. But as a best practice, if you're looking to relocate, I would clearly state in the objective, why. So I want to bring that up again because I think it's important enough to bring it up. But number two, you don't want to get pigeonholed to a certain location. If your goal is to get out of Chicago because it's too cold and you want to move to Florida, don't put the Chicago address in the header of your resume.
That is really good advice. For our audience, I know I'm from New Jersey, and when I first thought about moving to Chicago, I had, a lot of concerns about much the same thing. And if I knew then what I know now, it probably would have been a lot easier and quicker for me to find a position if I had followed your advice. So Dan, that is like excellent advice. So one of our colleagues is saying they're looking to relocate to either Florida or California, and they're in Illinois. So I think you just gave that person, Mr. Sori, some really good advice.
I want to toss one thing in there. If you're when you're looking to leave, there's a really good website called bestplacestolive.net. You can put in where you currently are, where you want to go, expected salaries, and what it's going to do is it's going to give you a cost of living calculator. So it's going to translate over what transportation, groceries, expected utility costs, all of that. So it's going to allow you to get a better understanding, because the cost of living is drastically different in each state, especially when you start talking about California, where, you know, in the poverty line in certain areas is 110,000. So make sure you're aware of that and you're doing your due diligence, because if you want to be taken seriously as a candidate who's really going to relocate, when you're having those conversations with hiring managers or recruiters, them knowing that you've done that research goes a long, long way, because it shows them that you're serious about it, that you're not just somebody who's applying.
So we're in a really different type of a dynamic now with, you know, COVID and a lot of people working from home. But with you and all the work that you've done in trying to recruit people, are employers, are they paying for relocation expenses?
It depends on the role, right? For all the new grads, I hate to say it, you're probably not going to get a relocation stipend or bonus or expense, and that's just because, being transparent and honest, you're coming at an entry level role. There's a larger pool of people. Odds are there's somebody in that city that can do the job. They won't have to pay an extra $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 to bring you there to do it. As you go up the ladder, the odds of getting a relocation bonus go up, because the talent pool is more niche. There might not be somebody in the immediate area that can do the job. As far as comparing that to remote work, it's really interesting. I actually have an example that happened recently. We hired somebody in California. They lived in California. Then we announced that the team was going to be remote. So they had the conversation with the manager, and now that employee is moving, I think, to like, I don't even remember, somewhere where the cost of living is way, way less. But it was something that they were open to because everything's gone remote. So it's really interesting between remote work, if the job is remote capable, and all that. A lot of things go into play there. And I know it's not the answer everybody's looking for, but it's almost a case by case basis. There's going to be opportunities for you to get you know, sometimes they disguise it as a sign-on bonus, or instead of just doing like a relocation expense, but there'll be opportunities where you can get that. And sometimes, you know, they'll say, hey, it's remote, you don't have to relocate, don't worry about it. We're not asking you to do it, so it's not our problem.
Okay. So one of our colleagues has asked in the chat that since most recruiting is being done online and the weeding out process is often automated, now can we bypass being weeded out when our zip code doesn't match and we are required to provide a current address on the online application?
So part of the process has become automated, but it's only automated to a certain extent. I haven't come across, we call them applicant tracking systems, ATSs. I haven't come across a super intelligent ATS yet, and I've touched about 7 or 8 of them throughout my career. Most of the time, what it'll do is it'll summarize information, and it will ask for addresses and all that, but it'll show the highlights of your resume, it'll show your objective, and that's why I was talking about, well, now it's the 3rd time I'm going to talk about it, being really clear in your objective and stating why you're looking to move. Whether, and you know, you don't have to get super personal about it, but whether it's for family, whether it's for you know, to be closer to family, or for whatever the reason is, make sure it's clearly stated in there, because that is going to be seen. There's a lot of misconceptions around ATSs and how much they actually automate the system. For the most part, what they really do is they condense information, so that way when I'm looking at something, I can get the pertinent information that I need and then move from there, as opposed to having to pull up a page, digest the entire page. If there's multiple pages, go through them. I can see everything that you're expecting, where you are in everything, and then move from there and pull up and compare to other candidates.
Yeah, and you make such an interesting point. You know, one of our colleagues in the room has indicated that, you know, it's one thing to be at the beginning of your career, but it's a whole nother thing when you have 20 years of work experience. And so then you're too experienced. Can you tell our colleague how he or she can work around that situation?
So it's always an interesting one, because I feel for people with 20 years experience right now, because COVID has really decimated that part of the population in the workforce. When the biggest thing is going to be during the interview. Once you get past that screening process, or the resume, and conveying that you're willing to learn new things, conveying that you're not stuck. A lot of people subconsciously will constantly refer to what they did in their old role and not talk enough about what they want to learn in their new role. So there's kind of almost a stigma sometimes that hiring managers will get when they're talking to people with tremendous experience, that this person's really good, but are they going to learn what we're doing? Are they going to be too stuck in what they were doing at company X? So make sure that you are properly conveying that not only are you carrying this experience, but the experience is just your experience, that you're still willing to learn and you're still willing to make a positive impact by taking in new best practices. Because it's shocking to me how often that's the feedback I receive, that this candidate's really, really good, but I don't know if I can teach him. It happens way more than people realize.
Yeah. Dan, that is excellent advice. And let me add, for our colleague, I would say, just like Dan is saying, keep refreshing your skill set. Belong to a professional society, or an association that's in your field. Go to the luncheons and learns, even if it's online. Keep refreshing your background and your experience. But I'll say this, you have to really, really work your contacts. And so I always tell people, do a little circle. All the people that you know really well, put their information in there, emails, everything. People that you know less well outside that circle, email, phone numbers, everything. And then the people that you want to meet, put them outside the circle, and somehow make your way to meet that person. So Dan, can you add to that? Because you have so much experience in recruitment.
Yeah, don't be afraid to say hello. I can't, going into this, I was joking with my wife. I love doing these, and every time I always get like my views on my profile go up by 25%, and it's all these Roosevelt alumni or Roosevelt students, and no one, like one person, will reach out beforehand. Don't be afraid to say hi. I know it's awkward not knowing somebody and all that, but with COVID and the virtual world we live in, networking has to be different, and sometimes it's just as simple as saying, like, hey, I'm going to be attending this. Do you have any advice for me? Can we have a conversation? This is what I want to do. And 9 times out of I know I always try to respond to everybody. Sometimes you're going to reach out to some recruiters or someone, and they're not active on LinkedIn, or they're not going to respond. That's fine. It's whatever. Find people that are worth talking to and have conversations with them. Set up a lunch and learn. Set up a coffee talk. Whatever you can. Just make sure you're talking to people. Don't feel like because we're in COVID, I can't go to a happy hour and I'm never going to meet somebody new. Just reach out. There's nothing wrong with it.
Excellent advice. And let me also add, when I was in graduate school, I joined the American Society for Public Administration, and I was living in Pittsburgh at the time. Then when I moved to Chicago, I maintained my membership, and I said, gee, I want to go to a luncheon. I went in the room, and it was a restaurant that's right down the street from Roosevelt. And there was a man in there, and everybody was around him. I said, whoever he is, much like Dan said, I said, I'm going to figure out who he is, and I'm going to go over and introduce myself. That same person has been a mentor, a colleague, a friend. I mean, he's like family, and we have known each other for 40 years. And he is also a graduate of Roosevelt University. So like Dan says, don't be afraid to say hello. So Dan, what questions can be asked, of ourselves, people who want to relocate? Because I'll be honest with you, sometimes people think, I'm sick of this town. I want to move someplace else. What are the questions that you would ask our colleagues to ask of themselves before they make that step of relocating?
That's an excellent question. And I don't want to answer a question before it's asked, but the number one problem that companies have with people relocating is that 7 out of 10 times the person backs out. It happens all the time. Everybody's ready to go. Everybody wants to relocate. And then it comes time for them to do it. The offer's on the table, and then cold feet happen. So, I mean, as silly as it sounds, well, to go back, look at the cost of living calculator. Make sure you have a good understanding of what it's going to cost, like what your daily cost will be in that new city. Take a look at the housing. Take a look at the neighborhoods, Zillow, all that. Get a better understanding of what your neighborhoods are going to look like. Number 3, and this is the one that's silly. Ask yourself, is it worth moving? I just moved in the past year. It is not fun. It is not a fun experience to pack up all of your belongings, put them in a truck, and then bring them somewhere and then unload all of your belongings. I know it sounds silly, but is it worth doing all of that? And then just look at your support system. I mean, that's the biggest thing. What's your current support system? What is your support system going to be? A lot of us think that we're extremely strong people and we can thrive on our own, but mom and dad live the next town over, or I have cousins over here, or my best friend lives 25 minutes away. And if you're going to move, if you're going to transplant yourself from one side of the country to the other, that support system is gone. Yeah, you still have phone calls. Yeah, you still have emails. Yeah, you still have these Skype and video sessions, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as going over to a friend's house for dinner and wine and movies and game night. So what is my support system going to look like when I leave? And how comfortable am I with that, really? And if you think you're fine with it, my challenge to you would be start tracking how often, even in COVID, that you're seeing these people physically and that you're going to them with your issues and that you're having these conversations, because it's way more than you realize. It's way, way more than you realize, more times than not.
And so, Dan, this is a really good question that someone just asked. Is it worth it being a member of LinkedIn?
So I live on LinkedIn. So for me, yes. I think the bigger question is it worth it to have a premium membership and to pay for a premium membership? To that, it's the same thing. To me, it's the same thing as having a gym membership. You're going to only get out of it what you put into it. So for me, having LinkedIn, is it worth it? A regular membership, 100% it's worth it. Check it periodically, check for job openings, network, fantastic. If you're going to pay for the premium membership, if you're going to do that, ask yourself, am I going to actually utilize this? It has some great training tools, some great certificate programs, and some nice little bells and whistles that go along with it. But, if I join the gym, I'm not going to lose 35 pounds just by joining the gym. I'm going to join the gym by going and running on the treadmill and doing all the exercises and being active while I'm there. So is it worth it for the free one? Yes. Is it worth it to pay for it? You're only going to get in what you put in.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And I'll give you my example. I just had a regular membership to LinkedIn, but about a month ago, I couldn't find a colleague of mine that I needed to serve as a reference for me. He had moved from Chicago to San Francisco, and I needed the address and phone number and his email. And so I joined Premium LinkedIn to realize, oh my gosh, who knew you got all of this? So I agree with you, Dan. What you put in, you get out. So excellent. So let me just ask, a colleague is asking, if you're going to relocate, do you rent temporarily in your target area prior to relocation, or do you just do everything all at once?
If you have the means, if you have the ability to it doesn't hurt, right? If you have the extra income sitting around and you have the ability, it would definitely help your chances. If you don't, I wouldn't put myself in a financial situation like that. That's really a case-by-case situation. If I can't stress enough, I'm a penny pincher. I don't want to spend money unless I have to. I would be very, very weary of that unless I could sit there and say, okay, if I do this for the next, X amount of months, I can live and not change my lifestyle and be okay until I find something. So I would have some really tight parameters for myself around that. If you have that ability, I think it's not a bad plan, because it's showing that you're willing to be there. It's showing that you're a local. You're going to check more boxes, but I mean, that's tough to pick up and move and not have a job lined up. How long can you sustain that economically without a current role? Like it's tough. That would be, that's the case by case.
And I'm going to add to that. When I lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the time, after leaving Pittsburgh, I worked for a governor who was about to go out of office. So I said, gee, I'm going to be out of a job anyway. If I'm going to relocate, now's the perfect time to do it. And so I relocated to Chicago. But what I did was I took a temporary job working at American National Bank at the time, opening up land trusts. And then I got a chance to meet young people, and they introduced me to other people. So much like Dan is saying, you can't be afraid. You have to check your bravery at the door if you're going to relocate. But then don't be afraid to say hi to people. And that's what I did. And I met a lot of people, and then they turned me on to other opportunities. So that was an excellent question. So let me ask this. Someone is asking, is it fair to say that wanting to relocate just as a reset, and we'll have to see what reset means, or wanting a new experience of living in a new location? Can you say that in a cover letter? You want to reset, you want a new location.
I would find a much more corporate way to say it. I can't think of how I would phrase that now, but you'd have to phrase it in corporate jargon, because when I hear the word reset, I want to reset everything. My fear would be looking at the resume and saying, okay, they've lasted this long in this location, this long in this location, this long in this location, and they've only been here for that long. How long until they need a reset, and I'm going to have to go hire somebody who can retrain them and retool all these things. So reset might not be the right word, but if you can find a very polished way to say it, it would definitely, it wouldn't be terrible, but don't give them a reason to think that you're a flight risk.
Excellent, excellent advice. Now, one of our colleagues is asking, how can an international student target a cross-country job? And I know you probably get this a lot, Dan.
So international students, so I'm going to assume it's an F1, on an F1 visa. You don't have to tell me. I'm just making that assumption. It actually, as weird as it sounds, most times when you're talking about somebody who's on an F1 or an H1B visa, hiring managers are a little bit more open to them relocating because it's actually common practice. The odds of them backing out of an offer for a relocation are far less great than a U.S. citizen. And that's just because typically they don't have that family support here. So they're used to having to reload. They're used to being on their own. They're used to having to rebuild that structure. So it's at least in my experience, and I could be way off. I'm sure there's other recruiters out there who have had different experiences. Normally, it's pretty common practice that I see someone on an F1 visa, go to school in Minnesota and then start a career in Washington, or be in Washington and move to New York. We see that all the time, but that also ties back to needs around sponsorship and some other sections that I don't want to dive too far into the weeds with.
I'm going to say this. If you're a student now, and depending upon what field you're in, whether it's technical or if it's finance or management, whatever it is, what you're going to have to do is find someone that's going to be a mentor to you, and never be afraid to take, I'm just being honest with you, a clerical job or administrative assistant job, because that's what I did. And people see the fact that, gee, that person's reading the Wall Street Journal, or they're reading the New York Times. They're not just whatever. And like Dan says, don't be afraid to say hello to people. And I must admit, the people that I help are the ones who are the most aggressive, because you want to get rid of people. It's like you have so many people on your list to assist, you want to make sure, okay, I can take this one off the list because and I have worked with a number of international students who have fabulous skills, and people will take the chance on you if you have a sponsor. So make sure you find a mentor, somebody who can really advance your cause. So one of our folks, they say, any advice on how to bring recruiters to your LinkedIn profile? I'd like to increase the views on my profile from recruiters and hiring managers.
So do it in a responsible way, because I see people do this the wrong way all the time. And if there's a follow-up question to what I'm about to say, please ask. List your tools, list your skills, be very clear in that. Tools and skills, tools and skills. I can't, I help friends with their resumes all the time, and they'll talk about, you know, how simple their job was and how they don't know how to expand upon their resume or expand upon their LinkedIn. And then we'll have a conversation, and they're dealing with government bodies, and they're dealing with all these niche tools that really you'd have to work in their industry to know and understand, and they don't have that stuff listed. So if you think it's simple, don't think it's simple. List the tools that you use, list the things that you do, and you know, don't list them 100 times, but don't be afraid to list them multiple times. Using LinkedIn Recruiter, we do what's called Boolean searches, which are weighted searches based on words that we'll put into a search engine. So a really easy one, like let's say I'm looking for somebody who's a full stack Java developer, it would look something like Java and HTML and Spring Boot, or, you know, cloud, AWS, Azure. So I throw that in, and the people who have more of that in their profile are going to show up higher on my search. So that goes across the board for every job. If we're looking for administrative assistant and you've used Concur as an expense tool, don't put down that you've done expenses, executed expense tools using Concur. Be really clear about the tools and things that you've used, because a lot of the times, recruiters aren't experts in any area for the most part. A lot of us work across multiple verticals. We touch different things. So we're not going to be subject matter experts. So when we talk to a hiring manager, we get a really good idea of the ingredients that make a good candidate, and then we're just looking for those ingredients. So the more that you are specific and the clearer that you are on the tools you've used, how you've used them, the more likely you are going to have that initial traction. And then it's just about being clear in, you know, I use this to improve this by X percentage. This is how I did it. So that way there's some meat behind those ingredients. I'm doing this weird cooking analogy, so I apologize to everyone because I'm thinking about dinner already. But the big thing is just about being clear about the tools, because typically when we're searching, especially on LinkedIn, we're searching using Booleans, and those Booleans are going to be based on job descriptions based on those specific tools. You know, nobody really searches by putting in a job name anymore. They're too common, and there's too many overlaps. So they're going to be searching more around tools and skills. So make sure you have that stuff listed very clearly.
So Dan, big picture, what's the big employment picture? What's it looking like? What do you see happening in the future? What are the key jobs that people are trying to hire for now?
So, you know, it's tough to say. I'm definitely not an economist, so I don't know what the future holds as far as the impacts on COVID. I know that a lot of companies are ramping back up their sales teams. So sales is something that's red hot right now, especially at Motorola. I know that a lot of companies, because typically the way companies works is when something like COVID happens and there's an economic recession, some of the first areas to get cut typically, well, HR, underperforming sales, regular sales, and then they'll start to leak into operations. So those areas right now are the areas where I'm seeing the most jobs open back up, because those are the first to get cut. As far as down the road, I think that everything is going to be moving more towards computer science. So even though it's not something that might be in everybody's day-to-day, the ability to at least have an understanding of what's going on from a data standpoint, from a computer standpoint, is going to go a long way. I'm not saying you have to be a developer, but having an understanding, a unique understanding of something will set you apart from other candidates. I can't remember where I heard it from, but like when you start talking about dark chocolate, it's the chili peppers and light chocolate that make dark chocolate. Those are chili peppers and light chocolate is not something that you think about putting together, but it's that uniqueness that goes together that makes dark chocolate. So I mean, it's one of those things. What can make you unique, and what skills that you can take from a computer standpoint, add it to your regular skill set that sets you apart from the rest of the job force.
Yeah. That is great advice. I'm also going to say this: healthcare is really big.
Yes.
Particularly public health. So people are saying, they call it the Dr. Fauci effect, because of Dr. Fauci and his straightforwardness and the way he's talked about the pandemic and COVID-19. A lot of people, they want to go into public health. They're even applying to medical schools of public health, and in management. I'm gonna ditto what Dan just said. Technology, technology, technology. The better you are with all the technology and software, oh my gosh, you will always have a job. And then for our colleagues that may be in education, you can see a lot of older people, they're starting to retire. And a lot of people, particularly teachers, they say, hey, I don't want to be in the classroom anymore. So there are going to be a lot of opportunities out here, particularly for millennials and the Z generation. And I guess we're going back to A after Z. But there are going to be opportunities out there. You just have to make yourself marketable. You have to continue to improve your skills, and you have to make contacts. And Dan, I know you know this more than anyone because you're doing it every day.
Yeah, nonstop.
So let me just ask also, is there anything that people should be mindful of when they're considering making a move?
When we say making a move, do we mean a move like a cross-country move or a job move?
Well, relocation, if you could talk about relocation first and then making a job move.
Like I said before, I mean, the big thing is just making sure you have a strong understanding of where you're going. My wife and I were talking about relocating to South Carolina, and the first thing that we did was we went to South Carolina. We went for a weekend. We wanted to see what we were getting into, and 30 minutes into it, I realized South Carolina was way too humid. I would absolutely hate it in South Carolina. So I mean, make sure you know what you're getting into. That's first and foremost, because I promise you, the grass is not greener on the other side, where you're not going to move to a new city and outrun all of your issues. There's just as many dead spots in the grass. There's some patches that need work over there too. It's not all perfect, Right. Just make sure you understand that. I can't stress it enough. If you're looking at relocating to Texas because you want to get away from the cold weather goes there too, apparently. It's make sure you know what you're getting into by just understanding the demographics, the landscape, all of that in the physical place, because it's not where you're from. It's going to be a new thing. And as much as we all think that we can just adapt to change on the fly, change is change, and people struggle with change for a reason.
Yeah. And so would you give that same advice to a person who's in a job that they may say, oh, I hate this job, I want to do something else?
Well, the question would be, if you're looking for a job, how different is your new job going to be? Is going to California going to actually change your day to day when you're going to be going there and doing either the same job or a similar job? So, I mean, before I would consider moving to California, I would consider a local career change. And if I can find a career where it doesn't impact my cost of living and I'm happy and checks all the boxes, and I still want to move to California, then, I'm going to be on that cost of living calculator. I'm going to be figuring out, okay, if I move to this place, what is the job pay? What is the job pay out there compared to here? How many opportunities are there for this, and what does it make sense for me? I'm weird like that though. I want to make sure that I'm not the person who's going to take a step down the stairs in a dark room. I'm not that person. I want to make sure that I know what I'm getting into. So I mean, that would be my challenge to someone is if you're looking for the same job somewhere else, it's going to be the same job. So if you're really not happy, look locally for a career change. If you really like it and you still don't like where you are, then start to look out of the state for other opportunities. But make sure you understand the cost of living. Make sure you understand what that job pays in a new state. I talk to developers all the time that are making $110,000 in San Francisco, and I think they're going to make $110,000 in Arkansas. It's not how it works. You're going to make $80,000 in Arkansas, and that's just because the cost of living is so drastically different. So understanding those things and understanding how that's going to impact your day to day is really, really important.
Dan, that is excellent advice. I always say there's an opportunity to cost in everything. If you make this decision, you're losing out on this side. If you make that decision, you're losing out on the other side. So excellent, excellent advice. I'm going to say this, that I think people should sit down and do like what we call a plus delta, plus all the positives of where you live now, and then the negatives, the things that you might want to change. And if the positives where you are outweigh the negatives, you may really want to think about relocation. But Dan, you make an excellent point. Always try to do an environmental scan, because I really like humid weather. I'm from the East Coast, and when it's like 90 and humid, I am just like in heaven. But you sometimes you move to places, even if it's temporarily, for the opportunity. But Dan, you make such an interesting, case for looking at where it is that you're going to go and kind of going down to South Carolina, seeing what it's all about before you make that move. So excellent. One of our colleagues just asked, there are taxes related to relocation and job, right? So can you talk a little bit about what people can expect or what they should look for when they're thinking about relocating?
So I'm going to be honest, I am not a tax expert. I know that there are write-offs that exist around relocation for jobs. And I know that certain states don't have state income tax. So that's always a huge perk if you're moving from a state like Illinois, where the income tax is incredibly high, to like Florida or Texas, where there is none. But I mean, beyond that, I'm not a tax expert. So typically when I'm having those conversations, we have a team that handles that. Normally my big advice is, if somebody's offering you a $10,000 sign-on bonus, Uncle Sam's going to take half. So just be ready. Don't think that you're going to be able to hire, 3 moving trucks and have an entire crew do it for you because you think you're getting 10,000. Be aware that even though it's a sign-on bonus, it's still a bonus. It's going to be taxed heavily. But like I said, I'm definitely not a tax expert. So I feel I would be doing a disjustice to this group trying to answer that question.
But Dan, you did give the group some really good advice. Initially, you said there was a website called Best Places.
Best Places, I think it's bestplacestolive.net.
Okay.
I have it saved now, so I don't have to type in the website anymore.
But that is excellent advice. And so it seems like they give you a lot of attributes and a lot of things that you should look out for, because like you said, $110,000 in San Francisco doesn't quite calculate in Arkansas. So
exactly.
Interesting advice. So anybody else have any questions that they might want to ask that we have not? Because relocating, job search, it's really something. And let me just add this, and Dan, you correct me if I'm wrong. Looking for a job can be a full-time job.
Absolutely.
And there are so many lifts and fits and turns. Dan, go ahead.
So I talk to some people and they say they're looking for a new job, and they'll tell me that they're applying to 10 places a day. When I was looking for a career change out of the operational data role, I was probably applying to close to 100 jobs a day. I would, after I got off work, I would block off an hour and a half of my time and I was applying to jobs. Because it's important to tweak your resume for the job that you're applying for. It's important to get your resume out there because there are a lot of factors always going against you. I mean, timing's one of them. Typically, when I post a job, I will let it post and sit for 1 to 2 days, and then I'll go. And depending on the job and the location, I could have anywhere from 10 to 100 to 200 applicants. I wish I could say I had enough time to go through 200 applicants for a single job, but if I find 5 to 10 qualified people, that's going to be my first shortlist. That's going to the next hiring manager, because unfortunately, that's not the only rec I have. Typically, I fluctuate anywhere from 35 to 65 positions at any given time. So I mean, the timing is a huge thing. So, if you're only applying to 10, your odds of you getting it just right through 10, I mean, you're going against statistics, you're going against odds. Apply. Don't be afraid of applying to the same place, 10, 15 times. I recently got an offer out to somebody who had applied close to 600 jobs at Motorola. It's just about timing. It's about getting your name out there and creating that connection.
Yeah. So one of our colleagues did respond about the tax situation. They did say that, in terms of relocation, the taxes related to it's more or less like write-offs. So if you spent, let's say, $10,000 moving across country, you can write that off. I guess it's a business expense.
It sounds right, but like I said, I'm not a tax expert. I'm not 100% sure.
So one of our colleagues asked, can you recommend any books and or career centers to help with job searches?
Books, one of my favorite, well, it's definitely not one of my favorite books, but one of the best books I've read in that regard is How to Say Anything to Anyone. It really teaches you how to be a very concise communicator, especially when you're dealing with business colleagues, recruiters, hiring managers, the ability to kind of cut through everything and clearly declare your intent and clearly define expectations and how to give examples to that without upsetting or being off-putting towards people. That book has done wonders for me, both in my personal life and in my professional life. I highly recommend that book to everyone. As far as career centers, I'll be honest, I'm not if you're a Roosevelt student, I wish I could go back and talk to my college self. I would be in my ear to tell myself to go to the career center every day. I definitely wasn't that person in college. I regret it tremendously because I feel like I hampered myself. I mean, take advantage of any programs that are going to give you interview coaching, interview tips. All that stuff is so
helpful.
So that way you're not me and falling on your face in your first set of interviews because you're just not used to having to talk about yourself and you're not used to giving these examples.
Well, Dan, you have given us some really good food for thought. And so I am going to pass it back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. Howard and Dan. This conversation has been very, very enlightening, and I hope our students and alumni have gotten a lot out of this conversation and you sharing your insights. And I wanted to follow up with that last question. My personal favorite set of books is to read the Knock 'em Dead series, where he does the cover letters and resumes. I found that personally very helpful when I was going through career changes. In terms of the Career Center, we work with alumni as well as current students. So I know we have several alumni on this webinar today. So please know that we also are here to assist you. And there's also, because we're free of charge, And also there's a center in Chicago called the Chicago Center for Transitions. And so it's for people who maybe you were displaced, or maybe you're thinking of a career change and you've got 20, 30 years of experience behind your belt. They can do more intense one-on-one counseling with you, coaching with you. So they are a resource as well, but they're not free. So just an FYI on that. We are recording this workshop, and so we will email a copy of it to everyone who registered. So I know we have some people who weren't able to join us or had to leave early. We'll also post it on our YouTube channel, and we'll give you the link to that as well when we email you. And I wanted to put in a little plug for our career fair that's coming up on April 8th. We're having a virtual career fair, and we will have some preparatory workshops in March and April leading up to that. And we're working on a marketing campaign to send out to students and alumni. So you should be receiving something soon. And if you would like to make an appointment to talk with the career counselor, or if you have a question to ask us, we are still working remotely. So the best way to reach us is via email at career@roosevelt.edu. And if you also have some ideas of different workshop topics that you would like, we had this topic today because of feedback from alumni and current students who specifically requested this topic. So we want to make sure that, what we're doing isn't always just what we think you need, but topics that are, pertinent to you and where you're at right now and what you want. So please give us any feedback you have on different topics you'd like to see us offer. So with that, I think we are done. And thanks again to our panelists, and as well as to our students and alumni who asked some very great questions today. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.